Good morning. Welcome to Inquisition Update. My name's Tom Fress, and I'll be your host for the next hour. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to continue our reading and discussion of the book Codeword Barbelon 2, subtitled Antichrist is a Woman, Alive and Well Again. Yesterday, at the end of the broadcast, we were discussing Henry Kissinger, world-class inquisitor and devout papist, one who was recruited by the Vatican to be an advisor to the Pope, and world-class criminal. The author sums up just some of Henry Kissinger's crimes against humanity. It says he was for the CIA-sponsored coup to murder President Salvador Allende of Chile, the illegal bombing of Cambodia, the 12-day Christmas bombing of Hanoi in 1972, his defense of Beijing's decision to crush the student demonstrators at Tiananmen Square, and illegal intelligence gathering on American citizens. And the author gives us a note that Henry Kissinger, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, was Secretary of State under President Nixon. He also held positions in the Ford and Reagan administrations and is the author of over a dozen books on foreign policy. Foreign policy. You can just hear Henry, can't you? Curiously, Henry Kissinger was also named by President Bush as the chairman, get this, world-class inquisitor, world-class assassin, papal knight. Henry Kissinger was named chairman of the September 11th, 2001 investigatory commission into 9/11. Quite a pedigree, that Henry Kissinger. Turns out he didn't serve on the commission for very long because of protests. Much deserved protests, by the way. But nonetheless, he was named to chair that commission. 9/11, a government-sponsored false flag operation, a self-inflicted wound to get this blind, deaf, dumb, and spiritually illiterate, biblically, spiritually, and historically illiterate Protestant nation to go on another papal crusade for the Pope in the Middle East, Iraq, Afghanistan, and soon Iran. And the whole purpose of that is to secure the Middle East for an eventual reign of the Pope from Jerusalem, the apple of the Pope's eye, Jerusalem, Israel. That's what Henry Kissinger is all about. Now, if you're following along, page 51, at the top of the page, it says, and what is Mr. Kissinger's avowed mission? What is Henry Kissinger's avowed mission? Rear Admiral Chester Ward, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Jesuit-run Council on Foreign Relations for 16 years, in his book, Kissinger on the Couch, he wrote this, quote, the most powerful clique in these elite groups have one objective in common. They want to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and the national independence of the United States. And the author gives us a note. He says, Chester Ward and Phyllis Schlafly in the book Kissinger on the Couch, first edition, New Rochelle, New York, Arlington House Publishers, 1974, page 129. See also Barry Goldwater's book, With No Apologies, The Personal and Political Memoirs of United States Senator. And it says also published by HarperCollins, and the citation it gives from page 277 and 278 says Goldwater was a 5-term U.S. Senator and the Republican Party's nominee for president in the 1964 election and a major general in the United States Air Force Reserve. Powerful man. But he said of Henry Kissinger and the Council on Foreign Relations, he says the most powerful clique in these elite groups have one objective in common. They want to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and the national independence of the United States of America. Why? Because they're going to throw us into a one-world government underneath the Pope. The New World Order. Simply the old world order restored. A revived Roman Empire. And the Pope is going to be Caesar. He's going to be the biblical Antichrist. The papacy is Antichrist, says James A. Wiley. Now, a quote, it says, "So we say to all peoples and governments, let us fashion together a new world order," said Kissinger in his address before the General Assembly of the United Nations, October of 1975. 1975. Another quote says, "Yes, there will be a new world order, and it will force the United States to change its perceptions," unquote, Kissinger told reporters at the World Affairs Council press conference in 1994. So Mr. Kissinger ought to know when he says that Obama is primed to create a new world order. On pages 144 through 150, Admiral Ward wrote, quote, "The Council on Foreign Relations has a goal: submergence of the United States sovereignty and national independence into an all-powerful one-world government. This lust to surrender the sovereignty and independence of the United States is pervasive throughout most of the membership." Remember, he's talking about the Council on Foreign Relations. And it says they consider that this objective is at once so idealistic and so urgent that their end justifies any means. In the entire CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations lexicon, there is no term of revulsion carrying a meaning so deep as, quote unquote, America first. They hate America. They hate America's leading role. The only leading role that the Council on Foreign Relations will accept is America's leading military role in subjecting the rest of the world to the papacy. When that is accomplished, this nation will cease to exist as we've known it. We will no longer be a sovereign nation. We'll be under a global government that they are preparing to rule over us. Now, here's a note. Kissinger on the couch, page 144 through 150 in the 1975 edition. Here, this is important. It says, although Admiral Ward was once a member of the Council on Foreign Relations for 15 years, he became one of its severest critics after his resignation from the Council on Foreign Relations. So here we have Chester Ward, Admiral Chester Ward, once a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, obviously discovered what it was really all about, had a change of heart. Hopefully he read his Bible and realized what the Council on Foreign Relations was all about, what the New World Order was all about, and repented, and now cries out against the Council on Foreign Relations, as all of God's people should. Now, it may surprise you, reader, says the author, to know who started this modern movement for world government. Get this, he says, it was Pope Paul VI who, quote, wrote a papal encyclical that called on the nations to abandon sovereignty to form a world government. And this quote comes from William T. James, editor in his Four Shocks of Antichrist, published Eugene, Oregon, Harvest House Publishers, 1997, page 101. And who will control this single global authority? Jesuit priest Malachi Martin, who we've mentioned so many times so far already in this book, the author of The Keys of This Blood, says in the front cover flap of The Keys of This Blood that it is the goal of the Pope, by which he means the papal hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church, quote, to establish, maintain, and control the first one world government, unquote. That comes directly from a high-ranking Jesuit priest, Malachi Martin, who served 3 popes, as I recall, a Vatican insider. And he says that the Pope aims to establish, maintain, and control the first one world government. There's your biblical Antichrist. Now, the book goes on to show us some symbols that have come to be synonymous with this New World Order. He calls them symbols of the two Satanists. And it gives a picture, a stylized picture, a very, very old picture, by the way, an artistic rendition of the Tower of Babel. And the author says, consider the following images and symbols for a moment. This one says, original drawing of the European Parliament to look like the Tower of Babel. And many of my listeners have already seen these images. And just another reason why one should run right out and get a copy of this book. So you have these images that you can show skeptics. And below this stylized artistic rendition of the Tower of Babel, which is nothing short of a model for the European Parliament building now standing in France, it gives what my listeners will recognize as the inverted pentagram, the 5-pointed star with 1 point down. We call it the Baphomet. The Baphomet. It was a satanic symbol. And also another image of a goat's head. And then, in comparison of those two images with the identification card of the European Union. Blending into the paper of the identification card for the European Union is an artistic, stylized goat's head. Now, the author says, notice the watermark image of the goat's head in this European identification card. The new European identification card shown above has the satanic Masonic, I'm glad this author equates Masonry with Satanism, because that's what it is, shows the satanic Masonic goat of Mendes at the back in plain view. He says in parentheses, see goat head images on the previous page. So we can compare and contrast the typical goat of Mendes 5-pointed star with that is placed as the watermark background for the European Common Market Identity Card. Now it says when the above symbol that we often call the pentagram is used in black magic, it is called the sign of the cloven hoof, or the footprint of the devil. The star with 2 points upward to look like the horns of a goat's head is also called the goat of Mendes, because the inverted star is the same shape as a goat's head. When the upright star turns and upper point falls to the bottom, it signifies the fall of the quote-unquote morning star. And this is a quote from Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Freemason, a devout Luciferian, one of the most powerful and renowned men in Freemason history. Manly P. Hall, in his book, Secret Teachings of All Ages. I also have a copy of that book and have read it. It's diabolical. Freemasonry is literally Luciferianism, and they worship the devil, the illumined one, they call him, the great architect of the universe. And the Freemasonry simply draws in marginal evangelical and Protestants, makes them swear bloody oaths contrary to the faith of Christ. And the first words that required to come out of their mouths when they enter the lodge for the first time to join is, I wish to come out of the darkness and into the light. And that's exactly what happens. They come out of the darkness that they regard as Jesus Christ, their Savior, and into the light of Freemasonry, the light of Lucifer. Joining a Freemasonic lodge is a renunciation of your Christian faith and an acceptance of another God, a counterfeit, Satan himself. And it's acknowledged by the highest Freemasons in their own books. Freemasonry is no organization for God's people. At any rate, this quote is taken from Manly P. Hall in his Secret Teachings of All Ages, published Los Angeles, California, The Philosophical Research Society, 1988, page 104. Chapter is entitled Ceremonial Magic and Sorcery. Ceremonial Magic and Sorcery. Now, you would think any Christian who entered the lodge who would read Manly P. Hall's book and the title of the chapter, Ceremonial Magic and Sorcery, would renounce Freemasonry. But most don't. They continue up the ladder in Freemasonry and eventually serve the diabolical ends of this Antichrist system that is about to engulf the world. Now we're going on to another characteristic of this New World Order cabal. It is the use of hand signals. And the one particularly we're talking about is called El Diablo, or the horned hand symbol. And it shows a photograph of President, or rather Papal King Barack Obama, showing this satanic horned hands symbol. The represents the goat of Mendes, or Satan himself. And the caption under the photograph is, coincidence? See him do it again later in the book. And there are many pictures, many photographs of Barack Obama and other stage personalities, press members, other presidents of the United States. How popular is this satanic hand symbol? And it's a means for them, the New World Order people, to communicate with one another and to share communion in their soon-coming global Antichrist system. And it says, on September 13, 2009, at the MTV Video Music Awards, aired on national and international television, Jack Black, after repeatedly giving the sign of Satan, then said to his star-cast audience, quote, "Who wants to pray to the devil with me? Who's in it with me?" Jack Black then says to his audience of Hollywood and Broadway celebrities, "Come on, let's see your horns. Come on, let me see those horns." And he's talking about this sign of Diablo with your hands. And he continues, he says, "Come on, hold hands," he said. "Take the hand of the person next to you," which they all did, obviously, "and bow your heads and join me in prayer to Satan," unquote. He then prayed, quote, "Dear Dark Lord Satan, just want to say hi and ask you to grant tonight's nominees continued success in the music industry," unquote. It was viewed by some 20 million viewers. Satanism. Open, rank, and unapologetic Satanism. These are the New World Order cronies. They're all in it together. Several pictures on the following page, color, glossy pictures of this rock concert where the audience is responding to Jack Black with their horned hand symbols and their prayer to Lucifer. And on the following page, page 56, we see a very famous photograph of President George W. Bush giving the horned hand signal. I've seen him repeatedly give it. Also his wife, Fiddlesticks, now I've forgotten her name, Laura, and the two girls, frequently giving this El Diablo satanic hand sign. Another photograph of Barack Obama giving it with both hands, kind of a double satanic whammy. And another rock star. This one, the rock star Forsaken, the lead singer, also uses both hands. I love you? I don't think so. Do you? Apparently this commonly used El Diablo hand sign is also the hand gesture used for deaf people to say I love you. So they've got a cover for their little satanic hand signal. And the author continues, he says, well, what do we make of all that, reader? Is this a natural hand signal one would make when greeting a crowd in full view of the world's media and television stations? Or is it a deliberate signal to those with similar allegiances to identify the signaler as one of them? According to the book Cults and Personality, quote, the satanic sign of recognition is the horned hand, fist raised. And that quote is taken from Frank J. Makovic in his Cults and Personalities, published 1989, page 91. And he continues, so maybe they're all just saying, I love you in sign language, but then maybe not. Incidentally, throwing the horns, as they say, was popularized by Ronnie James Dio of the rock band Black Sabbath. When Dio's Italian Catholic grandmother taught him the corna sign, drawing on another, much older tradition. So it's been around for a while. And then we have Pope Benedict XVI giving the double horn sign, and why would he not? He's the one they all worship, ultimately. And then Anton LaVey and his wicked wife, the Church of Satan, also giving the El Diablo hand sign, the horned hand sign. No child of God should use that wicked sign. But you see it on television, you see it everywhere. Now, Chapter 7 of the book is entitled Creeping Totalitarianism, the Grand Design Exposed. The author begins Genesis chapter 11, verse 7 through 9. Quote, the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Unquote. Now consider and examine carefully the following photographs and paintings. Again, we see a stylized artistic rendition of the Tower of Babel, and then immediately beside it a photograph of the European Parliament. And the similarities are, well, striking, as if one was the model for the other. The European Union is trying to tell the world something. And the message is clear, and it's overt. It's not even hidden. The caption below these two photographs says, above, on the left, is the painting of the Tower of Babel by Richard Bruegel the Elder, a Flemish Northern Renaissance painter done in 1563. Next to it is the Tower of the Tower of the Louise Wiest building, and although it looks unfinished, it was actually designed with the express purpose of resembling the unfinished Tower of Babel as depicted in Bruegel's painting on the left. Do you get the picture? Yes, I do. We just talked about the side-by-side comparison between this artistic rendition, this artistic rendition of the Tower of Babel painted by Bruegel in 1563 with a side-by-side photograph of the modern European Parliament building. The images are strikingly comparable. Obviously, one modeled for the other. And on the next page, we see a side-by-side comparison of the same painting by Bruegel in comparison with the popular European poster that was pasted all over Europe advertising or celebrating the creation of the European Union. Again, they're identical. And the only difference being in the poster for the European Union, there are 12 inverted stars, inverted pentagrams. They're making no bones about this. And the caption underneath this photograph says, "On the right is a poster produced by the European Union symbolically depicting their mission. It combines the 12-star European flag with the rebuilding of the Tower of Babel, and with the motto, Europe, many tongues, one voice." Sound familiar? It was God who confounded the languages at the Tower of Babel. It is the Pope who is uniting the world again. Many tongues, one voice. He is the modern-day Nimrod, the mighty hunter against the Lord, the biblical and historical Antichrist, undoing what God did right after the flood. God did it for our benefit so that man could never be united again against Christ. But the Pope is Antichrist, and he wants to unite us all under his authority. And so, his motto, Europe, many tongues, one voice. The caption continues, it says, compare the similarities between the Tower of Babel of ancient times as depicted by Bruegel's painting on the left and the poster produced by the European Union. Note also that the stars are shown as inverted pentagrams in the shape of a goat's head, a well-known occultic symbol for Satan. They know exactly what they are up to. And that's the overt message. It's not even hidden anymore. It could hardly be denied. And then finally, a photograph, an aerial photograph of the Louise Weiss building of the European Parliament. This is the one that looks like the unfinished Tower of Babel. It sits in Strasbourg, France, which includes a tower that is built to intentionally look like it is unfinished. Now, the author continues. He says, now read Genesis 11, verse 7 through 9 again, and see how the European Union has sought to reverse God's word. Quote, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. Unquote. Now go back and read the words of the Louise Weiss building shown above, resembling the Tower of Babel as depicted in Bruegel's painting, and see the words, Europe, many tongues, one voice. The European Union is clearly saying symbolically that their goal is to reverse the act of God in separating the nations. And even though it can't make the world have one tongue, it seeks to make the world speak with one voice. But who, reader, do you think might be behind it all? What is the EU in honor of? What was Europe before the EU? It was a collection of nations from the decayed old Roman Empire, the very nations that had been vassals of the Roman Catholic Church. And now see the picture taken below on the signing of the European Constitution. The caption below this unbelievable photograph. It's an Associated Press photo, and the caption says, showing the signing of the new EU Constitution and this is in Latin, I'll butcher it, but I'll do the best I can. It's the signing of the Constitution, the EU Constitution, in the Appartamento di Conservatori Sala degli Orazzi e Curiazzi. Okay? It was signed on Capitoline Hill, Rome, October 29, 2004, below and under a huge bronze statue of Pope Innocent. That's right. All the dignitaries of all the nations of Europe got together to sign the creation of this European Constitution under the shadow of a huge papal structure, a bronze image of Pope Innocent. And I'm assuming it's Pope Innocent III, but he was the one that created the Inquisition, Pope Innocent III. But I'm not absolutely certain which Pope Innocent it is. But nonetheless, he sits there in a chair. This bronze statue must be close to 10 or 11 feet tall, just by comparing it with the people standing about. He's wearing his papal tiara, his beehive hat, and all of his papal regalia, and giving the trident sign with one hand extended like you normally see the papacy do. It's diabolical.
Tom?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, this is Nicholas. Yeah, that photo, I have a photo of that. I've used that in my DVDs. And my understanding is that is Pope Innocent. And the picture does speak volumes.
Yes, it certainly does. Leaves no room for doubt.
Yeah.
What the intent of the European Union is.
Now, I was going to go on live the next hour and just have discussion, and I was hoping we could discuss some of the points that you've been bringing out in the last few days.
Sure.
Very good points. So if you want to join me next hour, just stay on the line.
Okay.
And join me after the news, and that way all your listeners know you're going to be on further with me, and we can discuss some of those things.
Very good. You get a double whammy of Inquisition update today, folks. Stay tuned after the program. We'll join Nicholas on Cross the Border.
Okay, I'll see you then.
Thanks, Brother Nicholas. We'll see you in a bit. Now, we have this ghastly, huge bronze statue that must have cost tens of thousands of dollars to make, if not hundreds of thousands. And this statue of Pope Innocent overshadows everything. And it overlooks the signing table. Obviously, there was no intent to disguise what the European Union is all about. It is a Roman Catholic superstate. And it will rule the world. The Pope will rule the world from Europe, just as he did during the Old World Order. And what bodes for the United States, only history can give us a glimpse. But I've said so many times on the program, I know it becomes cliche, there's an inquisition coming to the United States that we just simply can't even comprehend. This Protestant nation is going to pay for the Protestant rebellion, as the papacy would see it. It's going to be payback time for the Protestant Reformation. This country is not going to be spared. Not even the Catholics that live here, who have lived under a Protestant Constitution and a Protestant Bill of Rights, and have used their own choices in family planning, and they've used birth control, and they've ridiculed and made fun of their own popes. They've criticized their own popes for the pedophile priest pandemic in the world. The Pope doesn't like the Catholics in this country at all. He has simply used them for the last 200 years to conquer the rest of the world for this New World Order. The United States has literally been nothing but a papal proxy warrior. And when our mission is done, this country will be completely reduced to pauperism. Never again will Protestantism threaten the papacy as it did in the 1500s. And I don't know how to get this message across any more clear than to just blurt it out. And just hope and pray some will take me seriously. We have to repent of our sins. We have to make our peace with Christ. We cannot have a part of this ecumenical movement. We cannot have a part of this new world order. Now, it says on the 5th of October, 1978, President Carter signed two little-known but significant international treaties at the UN, which effectively abolished, now listen to this, it effectively abolished the rights of Americans to own private property. That's what's coming for the United States. You will lose the right to own private property. Now, you say that's just too outrageous to be real? Wait and see. President Carter signed these international treaties at the United Nations, which effectively abolished the rights of Americans to own private property. The two treaties are United Nations Covenants on Civil and Political Rights and the United Nations Covenants on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And I'll just add, these treaties literally enforce the papal encyclical Rerum Novarum and Charity and Truth and all of those encyclicals that impose Roman Catholic social order upon the world. There will be no private property. Oh, you can pay for it, but you'll never own it. Now, the author continues and says, all that is now required for these treaties to come into effect is for 2/3 of the United States Senate to ratify them. This will automatically give the United Nations the right to abolish private property rights. Quote, how could that be possible in a fiercely free and democratic country like the United States? The reader might think to himself. Simple. The United States Constitution provides that treaties are the highest source of law in the land. Why would the United States President ever sign such treaties? President Jimmy Carter said in 1976, quote, we must replace balance of power politics with world order politics. And I'll bet you thought Jimmy Carter was a Christian. Well, the same people that think Jimmy Carter was a Christian also think that the Pope is a Christian. Former United States President George Bush Sr. said, quote, it is the sacred principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter to which we will henceforth pledge our allegiance, unquote. That from George Herbert Walker Bush Sr.'s speech at the UN, February 1st, 1992. That's right. President of the United States, George Bush Sr., said Americans will not pledge their allegiance to America, but they will pledge their allegiance to the United Nations. There goes your national sovereignty. And what were the principles to which President George Bush Sr. pledged his allegiance? They are to be found in part in the preliminary draft of a world constitution of 1948. Quote, the age of nations must end. The governments of the nations have decided to order their separate sovereignties into one government to which they surrender their arms. This quote taken from the preliminary draft of World Constitution 1948, introduced in Congress by Senator Glenn Taylor in 1950. Also cited in House of Commons Debates Official Report Volume 1, published by Canada Parliament, House of Commons, 1951, page 685. They've known about this New World Order for a long time. Did they ever bother to tell any of us that we would no longer pledge our allegiance to our flag or our country, but that we would pledge our allegiance to a global government centered in the UN. The author continues, he says, Gorbachev was also part of this agenda. When Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as the president of the Soviet Union in 1991, handing over the baton of his part of the plan, he wrote a letter to the Norwegian Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland in which he expressed hope that she would do her best to, quote, carry on the work that has started in the latter years for a new world order. That's right. Even the Soviet Union was in on it. Even Gorbachev was in on it. And I've seen the photographs of Mikhail Gorbachev in the typical penitent black suit with his wife Raisa, typically in black, a black gown, a full-length black gown, and wearing a black veil. And it is said that he introduced his wife Raisa to Pope John Paul II as the great spiritual leader of the world. That's right, the head of godless communism swore the Pope to be the great spiritual leader of the world. And he wore black, and his wife wore black and a veil to testify to their subservience to the Pope. A sign of penitence. They're all in it together, folks. They're all in it together. Here's a picture, and it says, in the same year that Mikhail Gorbachev resigned, President George Bush Sr. told the world, quote, it's a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in a common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind, peace and security, freedom and the rule of law, unquote. That's the quote taken from the United States President George Herbert Walker Bush Sr. in his State of the Union address, January 29, 1991. Now you know what he meant when he called for a new world order. He didn't bother to tell you. He was just talking to the other leaders of the world, the leaders in Congress, the leaders that were set about to hear his speech. They all knew what he was talking about, but they don't care about us. They're not ruling for our behest. They're ruling for the behest of the Pope. Why didn't Americans ask, what did he just say? What did he mean? What is this new world order? But Americans are fast asleep. Fast asleep. The author continues, but we shall shortly see that this movement for a new world order, a new economic order, a new world political authority, call it whatever you will, affected by means of what the internationalists call globalization, is merely a cover for something far more sinister, and it is by creating, or rather orchestrating, disaster, desperate times, that the new world globalists will have their big idea. This economic collapse, this endless wars, endless controversy, endless fear-mongering, is simply in preparation for a great big change that's coming. They're going to make conditions so miserable in this country that the American people will sue for peace at any cost. And they're going to get it. And Rome is about to soak this nation with blood, the blood of the prophets and the saints of God. History is about to repeat itself. By peace he shall destroy many. That's what the Bible says. By peace he shall destroy many. That's not talking about Christ. That's talking about Antichrist. That's talking about the Pope of Rome. And it's indicative of just exactly what's going to happen in this country. By peace, the Pope shall destroy many. Chapter 8 is entitled Desperate Times. Begins with a quote, again, from Jesuit priest Malachi Martin in his book, The Keys of This Blood, page 421. The world economy is becoming the single entity outside of which no state can develop, unquote. Another quote from Goldman Sachs chief financial officer, July 14, 2009, quote, our model really never changed. We've said very consistently that our business model remained the same, unquote. And here's a phrase from a song, as goes America, so goes the world, and I would add, rather, as goes God's people, so goes America. And it's going right in the dumper. Now, the author continues, he says, these are desperate, momentous times, more momentous than that of the advent of Ignatius Loyola and those of Martin Luther. The scenes are shifting in the great theater of the world, and the final act is being played out on the American stage. Quote-unquote change is in the air. Momentous events are unfolding all, and the apocalyptic visions are being realized. Men and women are beginning once more to awake to matters of infinite and practical importance. The issues, they are visible to those who have eyes to see, and will come into even sharper focus in the pages of this book. We are in the times of the, quote, greatest recession to sweep the world and to shake up all nations, unquote. And the worst is yet to come. Warren Buffett has said that the United States economy has, quote, fallen off a cliff, unquote. And because the infected U.S. securities that insured the dodgy bank loans and mortgages were traded worldwide, other banks and financial organizations across the world were affected, and the economy of one country, Iceland, even collapsed. Imagine that. On October 26, 2008, an entire economy of a wealthy Western European nation officially collapsed in 1 week. Michael Lewis, a New York Times contributor, wrote in Vanity Fair, quote, Iceland's currency, the krona, is kaput. Its debt is 850% of the gross domestic product. Its people are hoarding food and cash and blowing up their new Range Rovers for the insurance money. Even the fast food chain McDonald's is out of business in Iceland. On October 27, 2009, CBC Radio Canada reported that the last 3 McDonald's outlets closed for business in October, blaming the country's economic decline and falling currency, the latter of which has lost almost 70% of its value since October 26, 2008. We're headed for a global financial meltdown, and it's being orchestrated by the kings of the earth. January 11, 2008, the financial mortgage lending giant Countrywide Financial finds itself in serious trouble. Financial free fall, and we've run out of time. We'll continue with this tomorrow on the program. You've been listening to Inquisition Update on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Please remember me in prayer. The attacks just keep on coming. Satan wants this message silenced, and he'll resort to any and every means to do it, even to strip us of our life-sustaining employment. That's how serious it is. Please pray. I'll